Dr. Park Ji-soo rubbed her tired eyes, trying to make sense of the readings on her monitor. For 3 nights straight, she had detected unusual energy patterns coming from deep within the moon, and they were unlike anything in scientific records. The lunar observatory, nestled in the mountains outside Seoul, was quiet at this late hour. Most of her colleagues had gone home, but Ji-soo couldn't tear herself away from her discovery. The patterns weren't random. They pulsed with mathematical precision, almost like a heartbeat. She took another sip of cold coffee and ran the diagnostic program again. The results were the same. Something inside the moon was generating energy, and the output was increasing by 1.3% every hour. "This can't be right," she muttered, running her fingers through her short black hair. She reached for her phone and called Director Kim Tae-ho, despite the late hour. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice groggy with sleep. "Director Kim, I apologize for calling so late, but you need to see this data immediately." 20 minutes later, Director Kim walked briskly through the observatory doors. His gray hair was uncombed, and he wore a hastily buttoned shirt under his coat. "This better be important, Dr. Park," he said, but there was no real anger in his voice, only curiosity. Ji-soo guided him to her workstation. "Look at these energy signatures from the moon's southern pole. They began 3 days ago and have been growing stronger every hour." Director Kim leaned closer to the screen, his eyes widening. "Have you verified the equipment?" 3 times, Ji-soo confirmed. "I've checked the sensors, calibrated the instruments, and even had the backup systems run parallel tests. The readings are real." Director Kim straightened up slowly. Could it be seismic activity? Ji-soo shook her head. "Moonquakes don't generate this kind of energy. And the pattern is too regular, almost artificial." The word hung between them, unspoken but understood. If it wasn't natural, then what was it? Director Kim took out his phone. "I'm calling the USA. This requires immediate attention." Within 6 hours, space agencies worldwide were analyzing Ji-soo's data. By noon, the United International Space Agency had convened an emergency meeting. Ji-soo found herself in a video conference with 20 of the world's top scientists and space agency directors. "We need boots on the ground," said the USA director, a stern woman with decades of experience. "We need to see what's happening up there firsthand." The Selene Explorer, already orbiting the moon on a geological survey mission, was redirected to investigate. Commander Lee Hyun, a veteran astronaut with 3 previous lunar missions, would lead the expedition. Ji-soo was shocked when they asked her to join the crew. "Me? But I'm not an astronaut. I'm just an analyst." "You discovered this phenomenon," Director Kim told her. "You understand it better than anyone. We need you up there." 3 days later, after the fastest astronaut crash course in history, Ji-soo found herself strapped into a seat on a transport vessel, heading for the moon. Her stomach churned from both excitement and terror as Earth grew smaller behind them. Commander Lee sat across from her, his calm presence reassuring. "First time in space, Dr. Park." Ji-soo nodded, gripping her harness tightly. "Try to enjoy it," he said with a small smile. "Few people get to see what we're seeing." The journey to the moon took just 18 hours with the new fusion engines. When they docked with the Selene Explorer in lunar orbit, Engineer Kang Min-ho greeted them with nervous energy. "Commander, the energy readings have doubled since yesterday," he reported, helping Ji-soo adjust to the lower gravity. "And there's something else. The surface temperature at the southern pole has increased by 3 degrees. The crew gathered in the command module to plan their descent. Besides Commander Lee, Engineer Kang, and Ji-soo, there were 4 others. Dr. Yoon, a geologist, Captain Song, the pilot, Dr. Ba, a physicist, and Officer Choi, security. We'll land 2 kilometers from the epicenter and approach in the rover, Commander Lee explained, pointing to a map of the lunar surface. Standard safety protocols. No unnecessary risks. Ji-soo studied the thermal imaging of the area. The hotspot was perfectly circular, about half a kilometer wide. It looks almost like, she began. Like what? Commander Lee asked. Like a door, Jisoo finished, feeling slightly foolish. No one laughed. 6 hours later, the landing module touched down on the lunar surface with a soft thud. Jisoo's heart raced as she suited up for the expedition. Her bulky spacesuit felt constricting, and the enormity of what they were doing hit her all at once. "Stay close to me," Commander Lee told her as they prepared to exit the module. "Step where I step." The airlock cycled, and then they were outside, standing on the moon. Despite her anxiety, Jisoo couldn't help but marvel at the stark beauty around her. The gray landscape, the black sky, the distant blue earth. They boarded the rover and drove slowly toward the energy source. Jisoo's instruments showed the readings climbing higher with every meter they advanced. "There," Engineer Kang pointed suddenly. "Do you see that?" Ahead of them, the lunar surface looked different. The normally random pattern of craters and dust seemed to be organizing itself into straight lines and angles, geometric shapes emerging from chaos. "That's impossible," Dr. Yoon whispered through the comm system. "The regolith can't move like that on its own." But it was moving. As they watched, the fine moon dust shifted and flowed like water, revealing dark, metallic patterns beneath. The lines grew more defined, forming concentric circles and radial lines. "It's responding to our presence," Jisoo realized, checking her instruments. "The energy output just spiked when we stopped." Commander Lee ordered everyone to remain in the rover while they observed. For 20 minutes, they watched in silence as more of the pattern revealed itself. It covered an area larger than a football field now, the lunar dust continuing to flow away from the center like an ebbing tide. Then, with a low rumble that they felt through the rover's chassis, the center of the pattern began to sink, forming a perfect circular pit. "It's opening," Jisoo breathed, unable to believe what she was seeing. The pit deepened until it formed a smooth-walled shaft leading down into darkness. Steps appeared along the inside wall, spiraling down. "It's an entrance," Engineer Kang said, his voice barely audible. "A doorway into the moon." The team sat in stunned silence, staring at the impossible structure before them. Their instruments showed the shaft extended at least 2 kilometers down. "Command needs to see this," Commander Lee said finally, activating the rover's cameras. "We've just discovered that the moon is not what we thought it was." As they transmitted the images back to Earth, Jisoo noticed something else. Faint blue light beginning to shine from deep within the shaft, like a distant beacon calling them forward. Commander Lee stood at the entrance to the mysterious shaft, his decision weighing heavily on him. After an hour of debate and countless messages with Earth Command, they had their orders. "Proceed with caution. We'll use the buddy system," he announced to his team. "No one explores alone. Keep comms open at all times. If anyone feels unsafe, we turn back immediately." Jisoo tried to control her breathing as she checked her oxygen levels one final time. The blue glow from the shaft seemed to pulse gently, almost invitingly. "I'll take point," Commander Lee said. "Dr. Park, you're with me. The rest of you follow at 5-meter intervals." The steps spiraling down the shaft were perfectly sized for human feet, as if they had been made for visitors from Earth. This detail wasn't lost on the team as they began their descent. "The steps are worn in the center," Engineer Kang observed, running his gloved hand along the surface. "Someone, or something, has used these before." Their helmet lights cut through the darkness. But as they descended deeper, the mysterious blue glow grew stronger. After descending about 500 meters, they reached a horizontal corridor stretching away from the shaft. "Temperature is stable at 21 degrees Celsius," Dr. Bay reported, checking her instruments. "Humidity at 40%. There's an atmosphere in here. Keep your helmets sealed," Commander Lee ordered. "We don't know if it's breathable." The corridor walls were smooth and metallic, covered with intricate patterns that seemed to shift slightly when viewed from different angles. Jisoo reached out to touch one of the markings. "These look like writing," she said, tracing the lines with her finger. "But not like any language I've ever seen." Geologist Yoon Jae-in took samples from the wall with a small tool. "The material isn't lunar rock. It's some kind of metal ceramic composite. And based on the degradation patterns, these structures are millions of years old." "That's impossible," Officer Choi said. "Nothing this complex could have existed on the moon millions of years ago." "And yet, here we are," Yoon replied simply. They continued down the corridor, which gradually widened until it opened into a vast circular chamber. Their lights couldn't reach the ceiling or the far walls. The space was enormous. The blue glow emanated from lines in the floor that formed complex patterns across the chamber. "It's like a circuit board," Engineer Kang whispered in awe. In the center of the chamber stood a raised platform, and on it, a transparent pod about 3 meters tall. Inside the pod was a figure, humanoid in shape, but taller and thinner than a human, with pale, almost translucent skin. "Is it alive?" Jisoo asked, her voice barely audible. Commander Lee approached cautiously, signaling the others to stay back. "It looks like some kind of stasis chamber." The figure inside remained motionless, its eyes closed. It wore a simple gray garment that covered most of its body. Its face was human-like, but with larger eyes and no visible hair. Chief Science Officer Choi Soo-bin circled the pod, studying it with professional curiosity. "There must be controls somewhere," she said, scanning the base of the platform. Her hand brushed against what looked like a smooth section of the platform, but at her touch, it lit up with symbols similar to those on the walls. Before anyone could stop her, Choi pressed one of the glowing symbols. The chamber around them suddenly hummed with energy. The blue lines in the floor brightened dramatically, and additional lights activated along the walls, revealing the true scale of the chamber. It was at least a kilometer across. "Choi, what did you do?" Commander Lee demanded, but his voice was drowned out by a low, resonant tone that filled the chamber. The pod in the center began to glow. Transparent panels that had been invisible before now lit up with scrolling symbols. Then, with a soft hiss, the front of the pod began to open. "Everyone back," Commander Lee ordered, drawing the small sidearm that was standard issue for lunar missions. The team retreated several steps, watching in stunned silence as the pod opened completely. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the figure inside moved, its chest rising with what appeared to be a deep breath. Its eyes opened, large, almond-shaped, and a striking violet color that seemed to glow slightly in the dim light. The being stepped forward with remarkable grace despite its apparent time in stasis. It stood at least 2 meters tall, looking down at the humans with an expression that might have been curiosity. "Can you understand us?" Commander Lee asked, lowering his weapon slightly. The being tilted its head, studying them. Then, to everyone's shock, it spoke in perfect Korean. "I understand you," it said, its voice resonating not through the air, but directly in their minds. "I am Han, guardian of Sol 3. You call it Earth." The team exchanged glances of disbelief. Jisoo stepped forward, removing her helmet despite Commander Lee's protest. "The air is safe," she said, taking a careful breath. "And I want to hear properly." The being, Han, watched her with interest. "You have evolved as expected," it said, still speaking directly into their minds despite Jisoo's open helmet. "The genetic sequences are expressing correctly." "What do you mean?" Jisoo asked. "Who are you? Who made this place?" Han gestured around the chamber. "This facility was constructed to monitor your world. I have watched over your planet for 5 million years, though much of that time I spent in dormancy, awakening only to check on your progress." "Our progress." Engineer Kang had also removed his helmet now. "You've been watching us." "Not just watching," Han replied. "Guiding, protecting, waiting for you to reach the stage where you could find us." Commander Lee stepped forward. "Why? What do you want from us?" Han's expression turned serious. It is not what we want from you, but what we need you to become. You are the children we have waited for, the inheritors of all we have built. We don't understand, Jisoo said. You will, Han promised. Your arrival here has activated the final phase. Earth faces a threat greater than you can imagine. And you, humanity, are our answer to that threat. Han moved toward a larger control panel that had risen from the floor. This chamber contains the knowledge of a civilization that spanned 1,000 worlds. Your people call them precursors or ancient aliens in your fiction. We were real, and we created you for a purpose. The panel lit up under Han's touch, projecting a three-dimensional image of the galaxy into the air above them. Certain stars glowed red, forming a pattern that was spreading across one spiral arm. The threat approaches, Han said solemnly, faster than we anticipated. That is why the moon has awakened now. What threat? Commander Lee demanded. What are you talking about? Han looked at each of them in turn, its violet eyes seeming to peer into their very souls. You are not just humans, Han said. You are weapons, the last hope of the galaxy against the darkness that consumed my kind. And now, it is time for you to learn why you were created. The return journey to Earth was tense and quiet. Han sat in the Selene Explorer's common area, seemingly unbothered by the ship's acceleration or the suspicious glances from the security officer. The alien being had insisted on coming to Earth, warning that there was no time to waste. Your world must prepare, Han had told them. The awakening of the moon will be detected. They will come. Now, as they approached Earth orbit, Commander Lee gathered the crew for a final briefing. Once we land, Han will be taken to United Nations headquarters in New York, he explained. World leaders are gathering for an emergency session. What we've discovered changes everything. Jisoo stared out the viewport at the blue planet below. It looked so peaceful, so unaware of what was coming. I still don't understand, she said, turning to Han. You said my ancestors created humans, but I am human. Han's violet eyes focused on her. Your biological ancestors were engineered by my people, the alien clarified. We came to your world 5 million years ago and found primitive primates with unusual genetic potential. We enhanced them, guided their evolution. The result, many generations later, is you. But why? Engineer Kang asked. Why go to all that trouble? Survival, Han said simply. Our civilization was being destroyed. We needed a weapon that our enemy could not predict or counter. The landing at the UISA complex in Nevada was met with unprecedented security. Military vehicles surrounded the landing pad, and soldiers in hazmat suits approached as soon as the hatch opened. Stand down, Commander Lee ordered as he exited first. Our guest comes in peace. When Han emerged, there was an audible gasp from the assembled personnel. Despite looking vaguely human, there was no mistaking the alien nature of the tall, pale being. President Ryu himself had flown in from Seoul to meet the ship. He approached with remarkable composure, stopping a few meters from Han. On behalf of Earth, I welcome you, he said formally. Han bowed slightly. Your courtesy is appreciated, but unnecessary. I have watched your world since before your species built its first cities. In many ways, I feel I am returning home. Within hours, they were airborne again, this time on a government plane bound for New York. Jisoo found herself included in the delegation, along with Commander Lee and Dr. Yoon. The others remained behind for debriefing. During the flight, Han explained more about the threat facing Earth. They call themselves the Boik in their language, Han said. It translates roughly to the hungry ones, or the consumers. They are a collective intelligence that absorbs the knowledge and resources of the worlds they conquer. Like a virus, President Ryu asked. More like a swarm, Han corrected. Individual Boik are not especially intelligent, but together, they form a consciousness that has outsmarted countless civilizations. They travel from galaxy to galaxy, consuming all advanced life they find. How do they find their targets? Commander Lee asked. They detect energy signatures from advanced technology, Han explained, particularly the kind of energy the moon facility generates. My awakening will have sent a beacon they cannot ignore. Jisoo felt cold fear spreading through her chest. How long do we have? Days, perhaps, Han answered. They have outposts throughout the galaxy. But do not despair. The moon has defenses, and your people have potential you have not yet imagined. The United Nations General Assembly Hall was filled beyond capacity when they arrived. World leaders who couldn't attend in person joined via secure video links. The Secretary General, Song Min-ho, called for order as Han was escorted to the podium. A hush fell over the assembly as the alien addressed them. People of Earth, Han began, for 5 million years, my facility on your moon has been preparing for this day. The Bak have destroyed thousands of civilizations across the galaxy, leaving nothing but barren worlds in their wake. Your creators, my people, were among their last victims. Murmurs spread through the crowd as translators relayed Han's words in dozens of languages. Your creators hit Earth using the moon as both shield and watchtower. The moon contains technology that has masked your planet's development from the Bak sensors. Until now. Why has this protection ended? Secretary General Song asked, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. Because you are ready, Han replied. Humanity has reached the technological threshold where you can join the fight. And more importantly, the genetic modifications planted in your ancestors have matured. What modifications? Demanded the French president. Dormant abilities, Han explained. Potential that exists in every human, waiting to be activated. The moon has begun this process. Some of you will develop capabilities beyond your current understanding. Skeptical glances passed between the world leaders. This sounded too fantastic to believe. You expect us to believe humans will develop what? Superpowers? The British Prime Minister asked incredulously. Han remained calm. I understand your skepticism. Perhaps a demonstration would help. The alien turned to look directly at Jisoo, who sat in the front row beside Commander Lee. Dr. Park, please stand. Confused, Jisoo rose to her feet. The process has already begun in you, Han said. You were the first to detect the moon's activation. That was no coincidence. Your mind connected with the facility before you even realized it. Jisoo felt suddenly lightheaded. A strange tingling sensation spread from her spine outward through her limbs. What's happening to me? She asked, her voice shaking. You are awakening, Han said simply. Do not fight it. Before the astonished eyes of the world's leaders, Jisoo's feet slowly lifted off the floor. She rose into the air, hovering a half-meter above the ground, her eyes wide with shock and fear. This is impossible, she whispered, looking down at the gap between her feet and the floor. Yet it was happening. She could feel a new energy flowing through her body, responding to her thoughts. When she imagined moving higher, she rose another meter into the air. The assembly erupted in chaos. Some leaders backed away in fear, others rushed forward in amazement. Security personnel drew weapons, unsure how to respond. This is just the beginning, Han announced over the commotion. Dr. Park is among the first, but not the last. All around your world, humans with the strongest genetic markers are awakening. They will need guidance. They will need unity. As if on cue, the massive screens in the General Assembly Hall lit up with emergency broadcasts from around the world. Reports were coming in from every continent, people exhibiting impossible abilities. A firefighter in Brazil who couldn't be burned, a child in Nigeria who could heal injuries with a touch, a farmer in Thailand who made crops grow at impossible speeds. Secretary General Song called desperately for order as the assembly descended further into confusion. Then a military aide rushed to the podium, whispering urgently in Song's ear. The Secretary General's face drained of color. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, his voice cutting through the noise. We have just received confirmation from our deep space monitoring stations. Multiple objects have entered the solar system near Neptune's orbit. They're moving toward Earth at speeds that defy our physics. Han's expression grew grim. They have come. Sooner than I expected. The Bach have detected the moon's activation. Jisoo slowly descended to the floor, her new ability temporarily forgotten in the face of this news. How many ships? Commander Lee asked the military aide. Not ships, sir, the aide replied, his voice shaking. At least, not as we understand them. They appear to be living spacecraft, and we count over 300 of them, with more appearing every minute. The Vanguard fleet, Han said solemnly. Earth has days, perhaps hours, to prepare for its first contact with the Bach, and its first war. The world changed overnight. News channels showed footage of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. A bus driver in Tokyo lifted a crashed car to save a family. A schoolteacher in Cairo predicted an earthquake minutes before it happened. A police officer in Rio de Janeiro moved through walls as if they were mist. Governments scrambled to respond. Some tried to gather the newly empowered citizens for protection or study. Others declared states of emergency. Religious leaders called it either divine blessing or demonic possession. In the midst of this chaos, Jisoo found herself back on the moon. The USA had rapidly constructed a base around the entrance to the lunar facility, naming it Moon Base Alpha. The base became Earth's front line of defense as the Bach approached. Director Kim Tae-ho, now appointed as Earth's defense coordinator, paced the command center, studying the holographic display that showed the Bach fleet's progress. They've passed Neptune, he reported. Current speed suggests they'll reach Mars orbit in 18 hours. Han stood before a complex control panel, his long fingers dancing across symbols that glowed at his touch. We must activate the moon's defense grid before they arrive. It was designed to target Bach biology. Jisoo watched, trying to control her new abilities. Since the United Nations meeting, she had discovered she could do more than float. She could fly at incredible speeds and lift objects many times her weight. She wasn't alone. Commander Lee had developed the ability to generate energy shields from his hands. Engineer Kang could now interface directly with any technology, his mind merging with computer systems. I've identified 327 other humans with significant abilities, Dr. Yoon reported, entering the command center. They're being transported here as we speak. So few? Han asked, looking concerned. There are thousands more showing minor abilities, Yoon clarified. But these are the ones with combat useful powers. Jisoo felt a chill at the phrase, combat useful. Just days ago, she had been an analyst studying energy readings. Now she was being classified as a weapon. I never asked for this, she said quietly to Commander Lee as they watched personnel rushing through the base. Lee nodded, his face grim. None of us did. But Han says we were literally made for this moment, that our ancestors were designed to fight this enemy. Do you believe that? Jisoo asked. Before Lee could answer, alarms blared throughout the base. The holographic display zoomed in on Mars, where strange, organic-looking vessels had appeared, moving faster than any human spacecraft. They've arrived ahead of schedule, Director Kim announced. Their technology is more advanced than we anticipated. Han's expression darkened. These are scout ships. They will assess Earth's defenses before the main fleet arrives. Can we communicate with them? Secretary General Song asked via video link from Earth. Perhaps negotiate. The Bach do not negotiate, Han replied flatly. They consume. They absorb. That is their nature. As if to prove Han's point, 3 of the scout ships suddenly accelerated toward Earth, bypassing the moon entirely. They're heading for population centers, Engineer Kang reported, his eyes blank as he connected with the base's sensors. Beijing, New York, and Cairo. Our missiles can't catch them, a military officer reported frantically. Fighter jets are scrambling, but they're too slow. On the screens around the command center, they watched helplessly as the scout ships entered Earth's atmosphere. Conventional weapons fired at them, missiles, lasers, experimental railguns, but nothing penetrated their shifting, almost liquid hulls. The first ship descended over Beijing. It hovered for a moment, then released a pulse of energy that darkened a 10-kilometer circle of the city. Buildings remained standing, but all electronic systems failed. Then came the second pulse, this one biological. Where it touched, people simply collapsed. "They're harvesting neural energy," Han explained, his voice tight with anger. "The buck feed on consciousness itself." Similar attacks unfolded in New York and Cairo. Within minutes, 3 of Earth's great cities had gone dark, millions of lives snuffed out in silent, efficient culling. Jisoo felt rage building inside her, a white-hot fury that made the air around her crackle with energy. "We have to stop them." "We will," Commander Lee said, stepping forward. "Director Kim, I request permission to lead a counterattack." "With what?" Kim asked. "Our weapons are useless." "Not all of them," Lee replied, looking at the group of enhanced humans who had gathered in the command center. "We are the weapons Han's people created. Let us fulfill our purpose." Han nodded approvingly. "The commander is right. Your abilities are specifically designed to combat bake physiology." Director Kim looked uncertain, but had no better options. "How do we get you there in time? The scout ships are moving too fast for our vessels to intercept." Jisoo stepped forward. "I can fly through space. I discovered it during training yesterday. I don't need air or protection from the vacuum." Others spoke up as well. A woman named Oh Sunmai could teleport herself and others short distances. A man called Park One could generate intense heat and survived in extreme conditions. "We can reach them," Lee insisted. "We just need to know how to fight them." Han moved to a wall that opened at his touch, revealing a chamber filled with strange objects. "These are weapons created by my people. They amplify your natural abilities and target Bak weaknesses." He distributed the devices, bracers for Jisoo that streamlined her flight, a chest plate for Lee that enhanced his shields, gauntlets for Park One that focused his heat generation. "You must stop the scout ships before the main fleet arrives," Han instructed. "They are gathering data on Earth's defenses. Every minute they operate, the Bake learn more about how to counter you." The team of 30 enhanced humans prepared quickly. Jisoo found herself appointed as a squad leader, responsible for the team targeting the Bak ship over Beijing. As they gathered on the lunar surface, ready to launch their desperate counterattack, Commander Lee addressed them one final time. "I know many of you are scared," he said, his voice calm despite the circumstances. 3 days ago, we were ordinary people with ordinary lives. Now we're being asked to fight an enemy from the stars. But Han tells us we were made for this moment. Our ancestors were designed with these abilities lying dormant in our DNA. This is our purpose, to defend not just humanity, but all life in our galaxy." Jisoo looked at her team. A former accountant who could now generate electric currents, a high school teacher who could create temporary duplicates of herself, a bus driver whose skin had become impervious to damage. Ordinary people thrust into an extraordinary war. "We attack in 3 waves," Lee continued. "Jisoo's team will target Beijing, Min-Su's team will hit New York, and I'll lead the Cairo response. Our goal is to disable the scout ships, not destroy them. Han needs them intact to study their weaknesses." Jisoo took a deep breath, then activated her bracers. Energy coursed through her body as she rose into the lunar sky. Her team followed. Those who couldn't fly carried by those who could. "The Buck think they found easy prey," she told her team as Earth grew larger in their vision. "Let's show them they've never faced anything like humans before." As they approached Earth's atmosphere, the Buck scout ship over Beijing detected them. It turned, its fluid-like surface rippling as it prepared defensive measures. "We were made for this," Jisoo whispered to herself, accelerating to speeds that would have torn a normal human apart. "We are humanity unbound." The first battle for Earth's survival had begun. The battle against the Buck scout ships lasted 3 days. Earth's enhanced humans fought bravely, managing to disable 2 of the 3 vessels. The third escaped, carrying valuable information back to the main fleet. They will return in greater numbers, Han warned the War Council gathered at Moon Base Alpha. The scouts were merely testing your defenses. Jisoo sat silently, exhausted from the fight. She had led her team against the Beijing scout ship, using her flight ability to dodge energy blasts, while other enhanced humans attacked the vessel's weak points. They had succeeded, but at a cost. 3 of her team members had died in the battle. How much time do we have? Director Kim asked Han. Days, perhaps, the alien replied. The main fleet was already approaching your solar system when the scouts arrived. As if summoned by Han's words, the base's alarms blared. Engineer Kang, his mind linked with the base's sensors, spoke in a hollow voice. Massive object detected entering the solar system. Size estimates suggest it's larger than Earth's moon. The command center screen showed the approaching threat. A massive organic vessel, shaped like a twisted shell, pulsing with eerie light. Smaller ships swarmed around it like insects. The back mothership, Han said grimly. Their harvest vessel. Over the next 12 hours, they watched as the enormous craft moved through the solar system at impossible speed, devouring asteroids and small moons for resources. It grew larger with each consumption. It's heading directly for Earth, Secretary General Song reported from the emergency United Nations bunker. All nations have mobilized their militaries, but after what happened with the scout ships, he didn't need to finish. Everyone knew conventional weapons were useless. Han turned to Jisoo and Commander Lee. There is one last defense system. The creators built it into the moon itself, but activating it requires human genetic keys. What do you mean? Jisoo asked. The moon is not just a satellite, Han explained. It is the greatest weapon your creators left behind. But its power could only be unlocked by their descendants, by humans who had developed the correct genetic expressions. Han led them deep into the lunar facility, past the stasis chamber where he had slept for millions of years, to a massive door that hadn't been there before. This chamber contains the moon's core systems, Han explained as the door recognized him and slid open. Only those with fully activated abilities can enter. Inside was a vast spherical room, with a glowing blue orb suspended in the center. Rings of unknown technology rotated slowly around the orb. The moon's heart, Han said reverently. To activate it fully, we need 5 humans with different ability types to connect with the control nodes. Jisoo stepped forward without hesitation. I'll do it. Commander Lee joined her, along with Engineer Kang, Dr. Yoon, and a young woman named Jin who could manipulate gravity. Each of you, take a position at one of the marked platforms, Han instructed, pointing to 5 pedestals arranged in a circle around the central orb. As they took their positions, the pedestals lit up, scanning their bodies with beams of light. Genetic patterns confirmed. An automated voice announced, Moon Defense System activation sequence initiated. The room hummed with power as energy flowed from the humans into the central orb. Jisoo felt a strange connection forming, as if her consciousness was expanding beyond her body and into the moon itself. Through this connection, she could sense the Buck mothership as it positioned itself between Earth and the moon, casting a shadow across half the planet below. The ship is deploying harvest pods, Engineer Kang reported through their shared consciousness. They're heading for major population centers. On Earth, panic spread as the massive mothership blotted out the sun. Military forces fired everything they had: nuclear missiles, experimental energy weapons, even kinetic impact projectiles. But nothing penetrated the ship's organic hull. The harvest pods descended toward Earth like falling stars. But something unexpected happened as they entered the atmosphere. Reports flooded in from around the world of ordinary people suddenly developing abilities. A farmer in rural China found himself able to create force fields that deflected a pod away from his village. Schoolchildren in Brazil collectively generated an electromagnetic pulse that disabled another pod. A grandmother in Kenya discovered she could control plant life. using massive vines to entangle and crush a third. The final awakening. Han's voice echoed in Jisu's mind. The dormant genes are activating in response to the immediate threat. This is what my people hoped for. In the moon's core chamber, the central orb had grown blindingly bright. Jisu could feel the moon itself beginning to move, shifting its position relative to Earth. What's happening? Commander Lee asked through their mental link. The moon is repositioning for optimal firing angle, Han explained. Prepare yourselves. Channeling this much energy will be painful. Pain was an understatement. As the moon's defense system reached full power, Jisu felt as if her body was being torn apart and reassembled. Through tear-filled eyes, she saw the others experiencing the same agony. Hold on, Han urged them. Just a few moments more. The moon's surface began to glow visibly, light emanating from patterns that spread across its entire face. The regolith itself seemed to become transparent, revealing the technological marvel hidden beneath the lunar surface. Firing sequence initiated, the automated voice announced. A massive beam of pure energy erupted from the moon, cutting through space toward the Beck mothership. The beam struck the vessel's center with perfect precision, penetrating its seemingly impervious hull. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with terrible slowness, the mothership began to split apart, its two halves drifting in opposite directions as energy cascaded through its systems. It's working, Dr. Yoon cried out. But the victory was premature. Though damaged, the mothership was reforming, its organic technology healing the wound inflicted by the moon's weapon. The primary weapon needs time to recharge, Han informed them urgently. We must prevent the mothership from completing its regeneration. In Earth orbit, Commander Lee received the message and rallied the enhanced human forces. This is our moment. He called to the hundreds of empowered individuals who had joined the fight. We hit them while they're vulnerable. What followed was a battle unlike any in human history. Enhanced humans flew through space without protection, their new abilities making them impervious to vacuum. They tore into the damaged mothership with powers the Bach had never encountered. Telekinesis that ripped apart healing tissues, energy manipulation that disrupted their biological systems, matter transformation that turned the ship's hull against itself. On Earth, millions of newly awakened humans fought the harvest pods that had landed. Ordinary people discovered extraordinary abilities exactly when they needed them most. A middle school teacher in Tokyo found she could control electromagnetic fields, shutting down Bach technology. A firefighter in Sydney generated flames hot enough to melt the organic armor of Bach's soldiers. The moon fired a second, smaller beam at the mothership's command center, preventing it from coordinating its forces. Without central direction, the Bach vessels fell into disarray. After hours of desperate fighting, the tide turned. The damaged mothership, unable to complete its regeneration under constant attack, began to retreat. The remaining Bach vessels followed, abandoning the harvest pods left on Earth to be destroyed by the newly empowered humans. When it was over, Jisoo and the others collapsed in the moon's core chamber, their bodies and minds exhausted from channeling such power. Han helped them back to Moon Base Alpha, where celebrations had already begun. We won, Jisoo whispered in disbelief as she watched the Bach fleet retreating from the solar system. This battle, Han corrected gently. The war has just begun. 2 days later, Han gathered Earth's leaders at the United Nations. The world was forever changed. Cities lay in ruins, but a new hope had emerged. Humanity had discovered its true potential. The Bach will return, Han warned them. This was only their vanguard fleet. But today, humanity has taken its first step toward fulfilling its destiny as protectors of life in this galaxy. As dawn broke over a damaged but undefeated Earth, Jisoo stood on the observation deck of Moon Base Alpha, looking down at her home planet. The blue world seemed different now, no longer just a fragile ball of life, but the cradle of a species destined for something greater. What happens next? She asked Han, who stood beside her. We prepare, the alien replied. We train. The moon facility contains technology your people can use to advance centuries within decades, and there are other facilities, on Mars, on Europa, hidden throughout your solar system, waiting to be discovered. And beyond our solar system? Jisoo asked. Are there others fighting the back? Han's violet eyes seemed to look into distant space. Perhaps. My people had allies once, scattered across the galaxy. If any survived, they too will have been preparing, creating their own weapons against the darkness. Then we'll find them, Jisoo said with newfound determination. We'll unite whatever forces remain and take the fight to the back. Han smiled, the first time Jisoo had seen the alien do so. Yes, that is exactly what you were made to do. As the sun rose over Earth, humanity looked to the stars with new purpose. They were no longer just inhabitants of a small blue planet. They were the inheritors of an ancient legacy and the last hope against a cosmic threat. And they were ready. The end.